Okay, we're going to get started. Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee. Do we have some feedback? Thank you very much. Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee, we're here for 3 hearings today. First bill is 22-0100R, informational hearing, judicial and rem. Mayor Costello, councilman from the 11th District, chair of the committee. Joined to my right by Councilwoman Danny McCray, 2nd District, member of the committee.
Thank you, Mr.
Council
Chair.
Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District, member of the committee.
Thank you.
To my left, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District. Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District, member of the committee. Councilman Isaac Yitzi Schleifer, 5th District, member of the committee. Staff to the committee to my immediate right is Marguerite Curran. We have Nina Themelis on behalf of Mayor Brandon Scott. And I think that Nate Poole from the Office of Council President Nick Mosby is floating around here somewhere. We will get started with this hearing. Again, 22-0100R, informational hearing. Actually, let me take a step back. Never mind that. I'll do the housekeeping stuff once all the members are here. So 22-0100R, informational hearing, judicial and rem. I'm going to turn it over to the sponsor of the bill, Councilwoman Ramos, for brief introductory comments. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues on the committee, for giving us time to discuss this important new process to address vacant and abandoned properties. And again, normally we would maybe have this in ECD, but because it has to do with property taxes, I think that's why we're here in Ways and Means, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I submitted testimony this morning, but you'll hear from DHCD that this process is different from receivership, which is another strategy that we use to address vacant properties, as well as tax sale foreclosure, regular tax sale foreclosure. And we're really excited about in REM. First of all, it was authorized by the General Assembly in 2018-2019, and then this council, or the previous council, passed legislation to enable us to do this in 2020. Basically what this does is when the liens on a vacant property only, vacant and abandoned property, so it has to have a VBN on it, when the liens exceed the value of the property, the assessed value of the property, then the city can immediately foreclose on those liens and take possession of the property. Why is this important? We do not have to wait for a tax sale certificate, and we can control the outcome of the property, so that eventually, yes, we will be acquiring more properties, but that way we can continue this work on a block-by-block basis and work hard to get the properties to homeowners or to developers, or really make sure that the properties are used in a way that the community has been interested in using it. So I'm really excited about this, mostly because I was also in my previous work working on this and bringing it to fruition today. So today we're just going to learn more about this process and how the community can be involved. We had passed legislation earlier this year to have the liens, the citation for not removing the vacant building notice to $1,000, and that every day is a new violation. This meets up, this is an important piece of the puzzle with this in-rem process, because then the liens can stack up to above the value of the property. And so we also have a fact sheet that I've submitted with testimony that we will distribute widely, so that more community organizations can participate in this process, and community members through the 311, and then also submit properties that you might think might be eligible for in-rem to DHCD, and then DHCD can move it through the court process. I am grateful to the Circuit Court and Judge Carrion for working with us to make sure that there's also a single and dedicated docket for these cases, because that's going to help us move through the court system so that this process isn't 2 years, it's not 4 years, it can be 9 months to a year. This is a game changer, and I'm really excited to present it to the committee today and to the council, and I look forward to continuing the work around vacant properties, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Let's jump over to the Law Department. Who do we have? Elena. Is this approved for form and legal sufficiency?
Yes, we do approve the form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add?
We have no comments. We're deferring to HCD as it's being operated out of their shop.
Thank you. We have Baltimore City Information Technology, BSIT.
Good morning. Layla Lehman for BSIT. We stand behind our letter and defer to DHCD. Thank you.
Thank you. We've also been joined by Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District member of the committee, Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District member of the committee. Comptroller's Office, Casey.
Good morning, Casey Kelleher here from the Comptroller's Office. We stand by report and defer to housing for more information. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, DHCD, Commissioner Kennedy, if you could introduce any of the members from your senior team that are here today, and then please take it away.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Happy to be here. Alice Kennedy, Housing Commissioner. With me, we have Kate Edwards, Deputy Commissioner for Development, as well as Joe Kirshner, who is our managing attorney that specifically works on all of our tax sale, tax lien foreclosure cases, as well as in rem and our condemnation cases as well. Overall, DHCD stands by our bill report. And in addition to that, I just want to echo Councilwoman Ramos's statements that DHCD is extremely excited about the implementation of judicial in rem for the work that we are doing to tackle vacant properties in the city of Baltimore. This is a key piece of the puzzle. What this does is allows us to expedite some of the processes. It's the fastest process that we have right now outside of private negotiation when we have authority to privately negotiate and purchase a property. This is the next best route to take in terms of speed and efficiency with the process. So the work that the councilman in partnership with Deputy Solicitor Ebony Thompson from the Law Department and Joe from our team in terms of working with the circuit court and being able to create the docket and kind of come up with the plan to move these through is absolutely critical to us being able to tackle the elimination of blight within our city, which we know is a negative impact on our communities and our residents. A couple of key things that I wanted to highlight, and then I'm going to have Joe give an update on where we are with filings and process and so forth. We are hiring additional attorneys to help attorneys and paralegals within the agency to assist with being able to increase caseload. We have started to do analysis with Kate's team and the rest of the team in partnership in communities across the city, not just in the impact investment areas, but other communities as well, to do analysis, to get properties into the pipeline, to start on the in rem timeline, kind of pulling title and so forth. We have worked through some IT issues to make it a little bit easier to be able to do the analysis of the amount of tax liens versus the assessed property value. So that has kind of been a huge help in being able to do the analysis component to this. And we've also created a one pager that will be able to be shared. I believe that was circulated to members of the committee, and we're going to be circulating that throughout the city to residents so that they understand the process and they know how to be a part of it. We have a form that is up on the website where a resident can submit a property to see if it would qualify to come into the pipeline. If there's a nuisance property that is, been bothering them, or several of them that have been bothering them, they can submit that for consideration as well. And we're actively going to be, not only doing the judicial in rem, but then on the other side, right, once we take title to the property, the next piece of this is the disposition of the property and working on identifying those that want to purchase properties in the neighborhoods where we're acquiring properties and end up rehabbing and putting back into productive use. And like I said, this is a key piece to that because traditional tax lien foreclosure takes about 2 years in the court process, not counting the several months leading up to it for the title examination, et cetera. So we're hopeful that we could end up seeing this in the range of about 8 to 9 months or so, maybe. But I'll let Joe speak about that a little bit more.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, as Alice mentioned, I'm Joe Kirshner, managing attorney at DHCD, the Development Division. And I've been tasked with getting these cases underway and seeing how quickly we can get title and then keep track of the cases we've identified and come up with a strategy to move more cases through. I want to first start by thanking Councilwoman Ramos because really without her we wouldn't have this tool. And I want to emphasize that this is such an improvement over tax sale foreclosure, not just because we don't have to wait for the certificate, but also because we don't have to stand in line with thousands of privately filed tax sale foreclosures and wait while the court gets to our cases amongst all those. DHCD is the only plaintiff in these NREM cases, and so the court is only looking at as many cases as we file, which gets us pretty immediate attention on what we do file. So instead of waiting 2 years, we're really hoping that we can get that timeline down. And I don't want to jump the gun and say that it'll be 120 days or 150 days, but I will say that this differentiated case management system does automatically schedule hearings for each case, which is very different from tax sale foreclosure. It's hard to get a hearing in tax sale foreclosure. So there is basically a status hearing, which is 120 days from the date of the scheduling order. And that gives us basically 100 days to get our service done. So we are giving due process to anybody with an interest in the property. We have to follow all those rules. But we do get, at 120 days, we get before a magistrate. If we're still having, hopefully, if we're still having any issues with service, we can explain ourselves. And one of the problems with tax sale foreclosure is it's hard, with all that noise, it's hard to get the attention of the court and to focus on our particular service problems. So if there's a deceased owner or a defunct entity and we're having trouble, we're more likely to be able to get face-to-face with these hearings to be able to say, we would like to move for the court to allow publication. And there is a publication process with each case, and there's a posting process with each case. And that is the built-in alternative service. And I should say the court has been very accommodating. After they issued this differentiated case management system just for NREM, they have, the cases that we have filed, they have issued sheriff posting orders and publication orders right away and given us writs right away, which sometimes in tax sale foreclosure we would have to wait for an extremely long time. So all this is to say the process seems to be much more quickly. And theoretically, 150 days from the dates that the scheduling order is issued, we could have title to these properties. We haven't played one out all the way. We have our first series of hearings on November 30th, and we'll see, what happens at those. But right now, we're optimistic that we're in line with our service efforts, and we might end up with a significant portion of orders giving us title at that time. We have, to just give you a rundown of the case situation. So the first round of cases, we filed 8 cases. We had initially identified 12, and then, we learned a little bit. Turns out 2 of the certificates had been assigned already by the city to a new owner, so we lost those 2. And then before you file a case, you have to give a 30-day notice to the owners, and 2 of them we found to be faulty, so we had to go back and fix those. But, we're learning along the way. And our next round of cases, which we expect to file at the end of September, is 29. So we added back in some of the ones we had missed the first time around, and then we've identified 29. And then there's another round behind that, which will probably be the end of October or the beginning of November, and that's another 20 cases. And so we're ready to file regularly. But I will talk a little bit about the challenges right now. One, currently we have 2 foreclosure attorneys, and they are overwhelmed with their tax sale burden, right? So they have hundreds of cases that are still in the tax sale docket, and they're trying to keep those alive. So that's one of the challenges. And we have identified, I should say, over 400 cases so far that we want to file. It's a bit overwhelming, so we are trying to prioritize as best we can. So if council members or, neighborhood groups do make requests, at least while we're ramping up, we request a little patience. We're really trying to work to build our capacity. And I guess another challenge has been our data system and our management system, because we don't have one built. We didn't have one built for in-rem foreclosure. It's slightly different. But we have a new system called Slate that we've been working with the programs. I meet with them probably every other week, and a lot of back and forth. And I think we're maybe a week or so, maybe that's optimistic, a couple weeks from rolling out that and being able to really keep track of our cases. It'll help us, the pre-filing work and keeping track of our service, and produce the pleadings that we need from start to finish. So once that's online, I think it'll help everybody. And we have a bit of an administrative issue, just because we have this deluge of requests. We're optimistic that it'll be very helpful, but currently we still have the same staff we did. We do have a new attorney starting at the end of October, so that will help. And that attorney will be trained almost exclusively in RIM. This particular attorney, we kind of have him earmarked as a exclusive in-rem attorney. And we're also training the people who do condemnation at DHCD, so they've filed a few cases. This first round, they've filed a few, because we want them to have that capacity and be able to flex as the demand requires. I think that's pretty much it. We're in the learning stage. I think Alice summed up the hiring we're planning to do. So, I won't monologue anymore. If there are any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. Thank you.
You're done.
Got it. First, I got Councilwoman McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Kennedy, within the report, it stated, and you also briefly mentioned that there is $800,000 budgeted for FY23 to support the creation of paralegals, additional attorney positions necessary to meet the need for increased filings. How many positions do you expect to add with this funding?
With that funding, we expect to add 4 paralegals and 4 attorneys. And I believe that those positions actually are part of a group of positions that will be going to the Board of Estimates on October 5th.
Have you all started to build out the recruitment process for these staff members, for these incoming staff members?
We have. We've started to reach out through different legal networks, et cetera, and are actually asking, and if anyone knows of a paralegal or an attorney that would like to work with the city, we are happy to, start talking with them. And then we'll be able to formally recruit once the positions are formally created after they go to the board, and then, we'll have them online. But we are starting to have those informal conversations.
Okay, and you probably mentioned this earlier. If you did, I do apologize. But how many staff attorneys and paralegals do you have right now?
So right now, specifically working on, in REM, we have 2, and then the 3rd starting in October.
Okay, and just for my second question, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, and you may have mentioned this already, but how many cases were you expected to file? I know that this report came out in June, and I feel like you may have said 400 cases, and if that's correct, then that's fine.
So I hope this is responsive to your question. We have identified 400 cases right now, but that list is growing all the time. And really, we will file as many as we have the capacity to. We do see this, I think, as our primary means of acquiring vacant properties in the city going forward. There's very little reason to file tax sale foreclosure, for example, when this process seems to be so much faster. And then the other way we acquire properties through the legal process is condemnations. And we pay fair market value for the properties, but in these cases, we're talking about properties where the liens exceed the value. And so condemnation is, and the properties are vacant. So it's an unlikely, the owners aren't likely to receive any money through condemnation wouldn't be likely to receive money through condemnation for the types of properties that we've identified for NREM.
Okay. So the report came out in June. It stated that you guys would begin filing in July. Have you filed any cases yet?
Yes.
Okay.
So
What's that total?
Yeah, so the total is 8. Okay. I mentioned that we had identified 12, and I guess we've learned a few lessons, and a few of them fell out. And I think we originally, probably in June, thought we'd be filing faster. But some of the challenges I mentioned have slowed things down a bit. But as I mentioned, we do have 29 cases. There's a lot of pre-filing work you need to do, and we've done the pre-filing work for 29 additional cases. So we expect to be able to file those at the end of this month. We have to wait 30 days after we send a notice, for example. A little disappointed. I'm a little disappointed that we haven't been able to file more, but we're making that transition now.
Okay, thank you both.
Thanks.
Councilman Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Kennedy, I'm glad to hear y'all gonna have some more funding for the paralegals. My question is, what is the salaries? Are there benefits? Because a lot of times we don't pay those kind of salaries to keep people. And if we have that kind of money, what is the salaries for the paralegals, and are there benefits, or is just contracted work?
So the funding will support 4 paralegal positions and 4 attorney positions. Those are regular civil service positions within the city, so they'll come with benefits. I'll have to get back to you, and we can email you with the exact position and salary range that comes with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, so I know...
Madam Vice President, can you hang on one second? Are you with the media? Can you please move over to the side? Thank you. Just don't want to block the main ingress, egress. Appreciate it. Council Vice President, I apologize for interrupting.
my question is, so we know that the Comptroller's office also has a Department of Real Estate, and they also have I guess a similar program. I'd like really a description comparing the two and what kind of outreach are you going to have with them, what partnership, so on.
That's a great question.
So, and if you want to step in, the main difference is that the Department of Real Estate holds the tax sale certificates, right? They're the ones that look at the actual certificates. They do not file legal cases to do foreclosure on those. DHCD has the authority for the city to file foreclosure on those tax sale certificates for those properties. So the Department of Real Estate is not filing foreclosure cases and taking then ownership and title of those properties after the foreclosure case is done. That's DHCD and DHCD's responsibility and ability to do so under our authority. And then the other piece is that with judicial in rem, we do not need the tax certificate in order to file the foreclosure as long as the liens are higher than the assessed value of the property.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ramos, then Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you, Commissioner and Mr. Kirshner and all the DHCD team that are working really hard on this. I am super excited. I just had couple of questions. One thing that I forgot to mention in my opening, and I think it's really important that folks understand, that out of the almost 15,000 properties that have vacant building notices on them, the city only owns about 1,200 of them, right? That's right. So the city can only dispose of those 1,200 properties. And the rest of the properties are in this limbo land, right? It's either somebody's holding onto the property, the family is not wanting to do anything after the elders pass, or in some cases, particularly the house that caught fire and tragically killed 3 firefighters, the liens were ridiculously high because it was just left, right? So we never had any tool to deal with this other than a cumbersome tax sale process, and receivership is where we auction the property off to the highest bidder, and that works in some places but not in others. So judicial in rem is super important because we have to acquire those additional properties to be able to work with the communities and developers and homeowners to dispose of them. We have to have those, and so this strategy will accelerate the opportunity to acquire those so we can have those block by block solutions. I'm sorry I didn't mention that before, but the numbers are really important as to why this is critical. Everybody thinks, the city owns all these properties. No. So this is important. So I just wanted to add that, Mr. Chair. Thanks for allowing me to do that. And then my questions are, so you mentioned, Mr. Kushner, in response to my colleague's question about the filing. So the hearings, the first hearing will be in November, and that's the 8 cases?
Yes, that's correct. It's the remote hearing.
Yeah, we're hoping with this additional capacity that we would have, at some point in time, hopefully in the next year, we would have cases before the court every week, every 2 weeks. to be, I'm setting expectations here, to, to, keep moving. I mean, even if it's once a month and it's 30 cases a month or 40 cases a month, that would be fine with me too, and then just keep moving through. So how are you prioritizing how the cases that come in? I have sent you hundreds of properties, right, in my district, right? I figured, well, let's try it in my district, right? But we also know that we have this strategy around the impact investment areas where we want to use the investment areas and then the zone ones in there. Is that how you're prioritizing? No. So tell me how you're prioritizing how we're doing this.
So one of the things we are actually doing analysis now, because one of the things in REM that has allowed us to do is add that into the tool. So we've been doing an analysis in the impact investment areas as well as other communities to actually look at the vacant properties to then figure out what is in REM eligible, what makes sense for receivership, and then if there is anything left, for private acquisition or receivership. So those pieces of analysis are kind of coming in and happening. We do have some priorities in terms of the impact investment areas where we are doing work or where we have investment happening on other projects that we need to have, and are able to speed up. So there is a level of prioritization based on that. Also, we are looking at kind of in the same level of strategy around how we're, with our impact investment area, ARPA dollars, we'll be looking at stabilizing vacant properties that are next to homeowner-occupied properties. So there are other components to this that also come into play when thinking about if there's a vacant that we can file in REM that's next to an owner-occupied, we'd want to try to get to that one sooner so that we can get that out so that it's no longer impacting that homeowner next to it. So I'd say that there's multiple different components to kind of prioritization and how they're flowing in and around, and then also where we have some active work happening in some of the areas as well, where we know that one of the key pieces to this, right, is also having capacity on the other side for either homeowners or renters that want to become homeowners, that may want to purchase a property to renovate themselves, to live in, or to have developers and contractors, that are looking to purchase in property in areas where they want to, do work. And then also a priority for the administration, for Mayor Scott, for DHCD, is also supporting homeownership and homeownership outcomes. So it's also looking at kind of those components to this as well, where we know that there may be additional support or developer incentives from the state or other pieces, where if we can get those properties in that area through in REM and then be able to sell them, then we can reach that outcome. So there's multiple pieces of that prioritization.
Yeah, it makes sense because there's a lot of activity happening, and if there's a few houses on a block that are in REM eligible and some are, for the other tools, or if it's a private sale, then I don't know, maybe the 1600 block of Gorsuch Avenue is a perfect example of that. Then we move that forward more quickly. So I appreciate that explanation. But the fact is that we're going to have these cases go through more often. So it's not like we're just saying we're just going to start here and then. But so my colleagues can send their cases to you that they want, because we're going to be addressing them. So I think that's critical. And then you had mentioned that you're getting the lawyers approved. So how long after they're approved? I guess it depends on the recruiting. I mean, you send us the graphic and we will get it out, because it's important, I think, to send the message that, whoever's going to be a part of this is really a part of, making things happen in Baltimore City. So.
Yeah, we absolutely will be sharing all of the recruitment information, broad and wide, to be able to, get qualified applicants in to do this work, because it is extremely important. I did want to mention on the one question you also had about just the impact of this. So outside of the vacant properties, this is also going to assist with vacant lots. So if you've all looked at Code Map before and looked at some areas in your neighborhood, and when you look at Code Map, or if we have someone that's interested in doing a project or a new construction project or even a greening project, or a number of our partner organizations like Civic Works and Parks and People that want to do projects, we have a checkerboard pattern of vacant lots in the city where it's, city-owned, private-owned, city-owned, private-owned. And this tool will allow us to more easily address those vacant lots, to do site assembly easier and faster, to then have control and be able to either put that vacant lot into productive use, whether or not it be for a greening project or community project, community enhancement, new development, et cetera. So I wanted to just say that is something that we are also looking at.
That's great with the vacant lots as well. That's critical. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge one of my community leaders in the 11th District, Betty Bland-Thomas from the South Baltimore Partnership in Sharp Leadenhall, who's here with us today. Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, and I think you actually dovetailed right into what I had here. So my question / concern as it pertains to the lots is, what impact will this have on sort of parallel efforts to have more community ownership over lots, the Adopt a Lot program? Like, these are also tools that are used as blight elimination tools that communities rely on. And obviously we do want these lots to, have some sort of productive use, but how does this fit into that strategy as well?
This is a key part of that strategy, because right now one of the things is that if I'm a community member and I see kind of a larger vacant lot, what you can't see with your naked eye are the property lines associated with that. So I might just see a green space but not recognize that those are actually 4 independent private lots, and that the city owns this one, but the one in the middle they don't. They own this one, and then we don't own the other one. And we as the city can only give a license through the Adopt a Lot program on the 2 that we own. So then the community would be technically illegally doing activities or beautifying a lot that the city doesn't own, they don't own, and technically they don't have a license to change in any way. So what this will allow us to do is do analysis on those, be able to acquire them, and then be able to more proactively work with communities on, through Adopt a Lot or through, sale and so forth, be able to have complete and total, site assembly and ownership, to more effectively be able to move those back into productive use.
Okay. And the second question I had in your report noted the budget allocation for additional staff. Do you anticipate as this grows that there'll be a need for additional support or additional capacity over time?
That is definitely possible. This is one of the things that we're looking at, for the 4 staff. An interesting piece that we learned is the amount of paper that is actually required for these cases is more than there's a component to it. So, we actually had to greatly increase the amount of paper that we've ordered for these cases, which we weren't necessarily anticipating. So that's a minor thing when it comes to a budget, but there will be impacts that we don't know. We do see this now as kind of a primary tool for acquisition, and we will want to be increasing capacity. And if we are at a clip and we have the ability to then, move them through the process, because the other piece of this is the acquisition, and then the other piece is the disposition. So we have to look at it holistically.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Councilman Stokes, then Councilwoman Ramos.
I just have one more question for Commissioner Kennedy. I know I talked about salaries. Is that money going to be put into the budget? Are those positions going to be permanent, or is this just kind of one-time hiring? And are those, again, I know you say y'all have 800,000 and you're hiring those paralegals. Are they going to be permanent positions also? Or we go?
Yes, they're permanent positions.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you. Just following up on Vice President Middleton's question about the interaction between the Comptroller's office and DHCD. I think she was referring to the vendor lien program, and I'm wondering if the Office of Real Estate would be transferring those to DHCD to be able to do this, or that's not even possible. I know that I'll let you answer.
Thank you once again, Casey Kelleher. So the Department of Real Estate administers the vendor lien program for what I affectionately call the leftovers of tax sale. These are the properties that didn't get sold at the giant tax sale. After that, DHCD takes a look at the tax sale and takes some properties, and then we get the leftovers of leftovers of leftovers. With those, that's what we administer the vendor lien program with. We work really closely together. I don't think we're moving that process at all, but we're working on ways to coordinate a little bit closer through Slate to make sure that we're doing the targeted investment for the vendor lien programs that we can. So that's.
And so just to clarify, the vendor lien program, because if DHCD doesn't take the property after, or pull the property from the tax sale, which you're probably going to see less properties now because of this, which is good.
Ideally.
So the ones that you do have, many of them are lots, vacant lots. And so I have one in my district that we just inquired about, and it's got ridiculous amounts of liens on it, but it's in the vendor lien. So if somebody wanted to, or the community wanted to take advantage of that lot, they would have to make an offer, basically. It's not that the community would have to pay full liens to be able to get that property. They would make an offer of certain, so that you would be able to at least have your costs, and then the liens would be, not forgiven, it's called released. They would be released.
Yeah, the liens get waived. So if someone is interested, they can call our office, and their lot locations and information on the Department of Real Estate's website for the vendor lien program. They would call our office and discuss their intentions for the lot. The expectation for the vendor lien program is that the developer will return the property into something good for the community. So that they'll return it into something that doesn't have us coming back in 2 years for tax sale. So the value that's sold for is usually based on the assessment, and that deal would have to go through the Board of Estimates. And in that case, all the liens are waived by the city. But to start off, they would call our office, and we'd start the process of getting the lien sheet and the waivers to look at what they're planning to do.
Right, in this case, I think the community was very interested. I have another one where the community is also interested in trying to acquire it, in some way. So it wouldn't necessarily be a developer, but I appreciate the explanation of the difference between the two. But again, I don't think we're gonna, with this, you won't see very many more cases, any more properties, so that's good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Is there any public testimony on this resolution? Is there, okay, first we're going to do WebEx. Wait, hang on. Is there anyone, besides Miss Betty, is there anyone else in this room who's testifying on this resolution? Okay, Miss Betty, if you could go up to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. I definitely support what I'm hearing. And I'm hoping, Councilman, that we can have more resources available to the communities who would like to acquire these lots for the benefit of increasing our green space as we continue to keep it clean, green, and beautiful, as well as future areas where we could plant, fresh vegetables. I think this is a good opportunity for us, but I do find that, Councilman, we're going to need guidance as communities on how we can connect to get acquisitions, on these single lots that could be in our communities. I'm not talking about the large lots or massive blocks that perhaps developers would be interested in. But as a community representative, we have, as Councilman Costello know, a few of our lots that have been nuisance to illegal dumping. And we are making effort to keep it clean, but we don't have the legal right to stop people from doing what they're doing. Ownership would then give us the right, and we can get funding to continue to beautify that, and that would be so helpful. And it would empower the community to be more responsible for their space. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone on the WebEx call who wishes to testify on this? If so, please use the raise hand function. Okay, seeing as there's none, there's no other public testimony, is there a motion to move the resolution favorably?
So moved.
Motion by Burnett, is there a second? Second by Dorsey? Costello is a yes. Burnett?
Yes.
Dorsey? McCray? Middleton? Schleifer?
Yes.
Stokes? This resolution passes with a vote of 7-0 and moves to second reader at the next meeting of the full City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues.
Housekeeping item. Moving forward, this will be the last meeting of the committee in which members of the committee will be permitted to vote over WebEx. So in order to vote, you will be required to be physically present in chambers, and I suspect you'll be hearing from other committee chairs in the coming week regarding that matter and how they're going to be conducting business of their respective committees. Next bill, Bill 22-0220, tax increment financing. I'm going to turn it over to the sponsor, Councilwoman Ramos, for brief introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I believe, Ms. Curran, there's amendments that have been put on folks' desks and testimony. This legislation requires that the Department of Finance produce a report, along with several other agencies, produce a report about the impact of our tax increment financing projects and policies so far. Examination of some of the reasons why some have failed. I had one in my district that failed. And make any recommendations for improving our TIF policy from equity lens, but also through just logistical, and then also how can we utilize tax increment financing to address our vacant and abandoned properties? Because in addition to the acquisition piece, once there's disposition, we're gonna need money. We said in my letter to the mayor in February, thank you, Ms. Curran, and for the, there's lots of research from BNIA and other places that it's going to cost $3 billion. We're going to need $3 billion to be able to address the vacant and abandoned property issue. So I was just curious as to how this might be able to, using TIF financing might be able to work. And again, just for review, and I think the Finance Department might be explaining exactly what TIF is and what it does. But basically, it is a financing mechanism that is, in our charter, and also that has been used across the city, where based on what potentially could be the tax revenue and the revenue needed for a project on the infrastructure, basically has been used for infrastructure costs, then bonds are floated based on the property taxes, the future property taxes, being able to pay off those bonds. So we don't see those property taxes until after those bonds are paid. I think I explained that correctly, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. And obviously, Tiff's tax increment financing has been controversial in the past here in Baltimore City in terms of some projects, whether or not we didn't get proper benefit from them, et cetera. So this report would try to address all of that and surface all of the impacts, potential drawbacks, any new changes to policy, but also can we use this in neighborhoods? So I'm looking forward to hearing from our agencies. There are amendments at everyone's desk. One is to expand the timeline to 180 days rather than 90 days. And the other is just to clarify, one set is to clarify that this should be a collaborative report where the Department of Finance is working with multiple agencies and experts in the field and advocates. So I'm looking forward to how this works out, and I'm grateful for the mayor's office and working with the agencies to help with the amendments, and they'll report out about some other new developments here, which I'm excited about. And that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Let's start off with the city administrator. If you could also state your name for the record and position, please.
Good morning. My name is Ariel Giles. I'm an assistant city administrator for Performance and Technology Services. I'm representing the Office of the City Administrator this morning, bringing testimony on City Council Bill 220220, Study and Report Tax Increment Financing. The Office of the City Administrator supports this bill with the inclusion of the amendments offered by the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance already provided some of the information requested in this legislation through their bill report and has articulated a path towards the development of a full report in collaboration with Municap, the city's financial advisor. We believe that the Department of Finance and Municap should move forward with the development of this report without the requirement to directly engage the practitioners, residents, and advocates in the development of the report, as referenced in some of the amendments. This requirement would likely increase the time and it could that it would take to produce the report and increase the cost. We do believe engagement with the public is essential, and that the perspective of all interested members should be considered during the public comment period before the report is finalized. Earlier this year, the city administrator convened agency leaders at the direction of the mayor to develop a comprehensive approach to the issue of vacant and abandoned properties in Baltimore. Our office still oversees this working group, and we'll review and consider the information found in this report accordingly once it's available. Thank you.
Thank you. Department of Law.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hillary Ruley for the Law Department. We suggested an amendment just to remove the city solicitor because the report's going to be made public, but of course, we're always your lawyer, so you can always consult with us, and the charter requires that. So just to clear your privilege hurdle, we recommended a quick amendment, but other than that, we approve for form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you. Every time you say we're always your lawyer, it feels like the Allstate commercial. You're in good hands.
Let's hope.
Thank you for the reassurance. Okay, and that's essentially what Amendment 1 from Law does, correct? Okay. Otherwise, it's approved for form and legal sufficiency. Thank you. Office of Equity and Civil Rights.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kaylin Young, Deputy Director here for the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. We defer, we stand by our report and defer to the Department of Finance. Just a quick caveat from the Director, though, just asking the Council to be mindful about the capacity in our office. As you know, we're pulling together the police accountability structures. It's taking a lot of bandwidth. So we're happy to be a part of this, but just as it pertains to timing in the 90 days, you know, if it's stretched out a little bit, it'd be a little bit more helpful for us.
Thank you. Department of Housing and Community Development.
Good morning. DHCD stands by our bill report and our looking forward to continuing the work with the Department of Finance on the non-contiguous TIF study that we're starting.
Thank you. Colleagues, does anyone have any specific questions for DHCD? Otherwise, I'd like to excuse them. You guys are good. Thank you. Unless you want to stay. Councilwoman wants you to stay, I guess. Okay.
Yeah,
Sounds like you're staying.
for just a little while.
Okay. Just want to be mindful of the commissioner's time. Department of Finance.
Good morning, Mara James with the Department of Finance. We stand by our report. We support the amendments. In terms of Councilmember Ramos's overview of TIFs, it was almost exactly there. We should note that we do receive the base assessed revenue, tax revenue from the properties. It's that incremental change that is what goes towards paying those bonds.
Gotcha.
And so we support this bill with amendments. We have already engaged with Municap, our fiscal advisor, to get this report and study together. Again, adding that additional time of 180 days to make that fit for that. We have a cost estimate of about $30,000 for this study, which we will do within our budget. And I am also joined today, I should note, by the Treasury Director, Janelle Rogers, and we can answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman McCray.
Thanks, Councilman Stokes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we know this is for you, Ms. James, in the Department of Finance. Baltimore City has issued 16 TIF bonds since 2003. Do all city agencies already have longitudinal studies to see how the TIF-funded projects have impacted communities over time? For example, I know that there was a TIF that was used for Frankfurt Estates within my district prior to me being a council member. And I know how much Frankfurt Estates actually contributes, how much those homeowners actually contribute to with their property taxes, how much they're generating in property taxes. So, do you guys have any studies that that actually show how these TIF projects have impacted communities over time? Have you evaluated job growth from these TIF-funded projects? Have they increased home ownership? Like I said, I know in one area of my district it has. And have they produced further economic development in systemically disadvantaged areas?
Thank you. So that is what we are hoping to really pull with this study and report together. It's an analysis that we have not done at that level of detail that we are hoping to be able to report out with this report now.
So what information, I know that we have case studies for certain TIF projects. What other information do you guys have outside of what it generates for property, what these properties generate in property taxes? Do you have any other information already?
I'll defer to the director here.
We're required to have a continued disclosure, and it's normally listed on Emma. It's a website where those that are interested in trading bonds would normally go to follow the impact of these TIFs. So there is some economic information listed there, but we can gather this information. This will be a part of the report that we'll be pulling in response to this legislation.
And I should note that in our bill response, we do have some links to those disclosures that she mentioned.
How does our finance department, how do you evaluate the overall effectiveness of a TIF-funded project?
So the overall effectiveness is we do the study of making sure that there's adequate revenue is collected to pay the debt service on the bonds to make sure it does not impact the city's credit. And when we reissue, or when we issue TIFs, like several ones like Harbor Point, they will issue in phases, so we will always go back and do a reassessment of the prediction of how the bonds will perform, or the district will perform with these bonds, or the financing, TIF financings.
Thank you both, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Council Vice President Middleton, and then Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of sitting here going back to when I guess I was first introduced in understanding TIFs, and that goes back to 2007, so 2007-8. And of course, no major TIF has been within my district, but I question studies because just through projects within my district, when we get studies, it seems to continue to delay the project. People ask for studies to almost keep that delay going, has been my experience. And I know that there has been studies and conversations just about this, this whole subject matter. And in my view and experience, I feel that you council members, if you have a question about a specific TIF in a certain district, that's where communication should happen between the council members, set up your meetings if you want information. But it's almost like how we, in a sense, deal with the PUDs within our district. So I guess my question is, having studies like this costs more money. Who can, I don't know who can specifically answer this, but how is this study going to me it's an added study. What extra help is this going to do? Because it seems like it would take, you know, just added demands from our city administrator's office to add, you know, maybe some extra things, but it's really council specific. Could I have agencies respond?
I'm happy to respond for finance about the benefit, I think, of this study.
I can't hear you clearly.
I'm happy to respond for finance for the benefit of what I think this study will give to us. So based on what Councilmember McCrae's question was about the broader impact, this will give us some more understanding of the economic impact in the surrounding areas. We can point to increased revenue in some ways, but if we can look at, as the study asks, around jobs and employment, we can have that as evidence as well to see what the impact is. We are also, in terms of capacity, just to note, we are working with Unicap, who is a contractor that we work with, our financial advisor, to do this study, and it will give us hopefully an understanding of not only the benefits of our current TIFs that we have, but moving forward as we do other projects, how we can utilize this tool or other tools.
And you continue to have information on website as available?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Stokes.
This is for finance. My question, not my question, but my statement is, we talk about TIFs and how they giving them to large developers, but TIFs actually help small developers in the city also. So I see the TIFs already working. I understand how TIFs work, and I said it on my first term of council, how we can take the TIF and put it in communities. One could be Perkins Old Town Somerset Development. If we didn't have TIFs there, we would create home ownership. You look over at Hopkins at EDBI, That's another TIF that they use. So I'm not understanding why we changing or looking at changing it when it's already there and it's already been applied to communities in the city. So can you explain to me what's the difference in it's working now and asking for a change? Can finance explain that to me?
So we're not asking to change the TIFs in any way. This, I believe, will just be as we're moving forward with other projects, so not impacting any of the TIFs that we currently have, but as we're moving forward, understanding how this tool could be used in those areas and being able to understand what the benefits will be to the communities in future projects, hopefully.
Well, my follow-up is it's already working. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to respond that in the beginning of my term, and I'm sorry I didn't provide this context. In the beginning of my term, I convened a lot of people around, how can we get more, money into our communities? I actually wanted to have a TIF in Chum to be able to finance the Tivoli project, and the commissioner knows this. And we were looking at non-contiguous TIF. We were looking at ways to make it happen because at the moment, the numbers actually don't work for TIF there. So this conversation comes out of some of those conversations around, yes, there are areas where TIFs are working great. There are areas where I'd love to have more financing to be able to do exactly what you said, Mr. Chair, and make sure that we have more opportunity. And there's also been some analysis done, or at least some criticism, I haven't seen the analysis, of whether or not there could be some changes to the idea that in a special taxing district, those neighbors are actually paying, in some cases, an additional fee or to be able to try to pay for the bond. So this is just a comprehensive look at this and a way to look at how other neighborhoods can also benefit from this idea. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to answer.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Councilman Burnett.
Yeah, so I want to, again, express support for this. I think that the thing that was mentioned earlier by finance is that there are no publicly available studies on the impact. And so us, not only as elected officials, should have access to information that not only anecdotally can we say something is working or not, but there should be underlying data that supports the expenditure of millions and millions of our constituents' tax dollars to be able to prove that it's actually working in black and white. The other thing I would lift up is that this is about transparency, because not only is this information, yes, as council members, we can call a meeting and sit down with Director Kennedy or someone in finance at any time we would like. The citizens who are sitting in the back of the room do not have that privilege to be able to do so. And so the more transparent we can be about what the citizens' tax dollars are going towards and being used for, we should be. And I think we have an onus to do so. The thing that I will say I was a little bit disappointed by was a request to remove the participation of advocates, practitioners, and residents in the development of the report. Again, I think that if we're able to anecdotally say something is working or not, that's not really how we do our work here. We should be talking to the citizens of Baltimore. We should be including them in all processes to get feedback on the impact of this, because I would flag that again. Port Covington alone, we've financed $137 million in tax dollars. We should have something in black and white that says, hey, this is working or not.
Wait, pardon me? Hang on. Can you please repeat that last statement?
In the finance report, it says $137 million financed for the Port Covington TIF. I'm just reading it from the...
You're talking about the total value of bonds that were floated.
Correct.
Resulting in the proceeds that were used for the infrastructure, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Just reading from the report, Mr. Chair.
No, I understand. I just want to clarify because the way you said it, it implied an amount of tax dollars. It was not an amount of tax dollars. It's an amount of bonds that were floated, and then the proceeds were used for the infrastructure on the horizontal. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. I think the clarity is important. But either way, we're talking about large quantities of money. Some of it's tax, some of it's privately raised. Either way, if we're using this as a tool, which I'm not saying is a good or bad tool at all, it's not a value statement, but if the finance department has literally said in front of us that this information is not publicly available to anyone, I think we as a body have a responsibility, if not a mandate, to make that available to not only us as elected officials, but to the citizens of Baltimore. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. The Baltimore Development Corporation on numerous occasions over the past 8 years has provided a chart which has been added to the bill file for various hearings along the years, outlining things such as the project, a description of the project, what the use of the project is, the size of it, estimated jobs created, and taxes generated as a result. So that information that you are referring to is something that has been presented to this council numerous times and has been uploaded to the bill file. And I'm certainly happy to make it a request of the committee to Baltimore Development Corporation to resubmit a more current version of that. I don't think we've had that, and probably the last time we had a hearing on this might have been 2020, if my memory serves me correctly. But just wanted to add that for clarification. Councilwoman Ramos.
Just wanted to add, there's an amendment, one of the amendments actually states clearly that in creating the report that the director will, work with advocates, practitioners, and residents. So it's really important that, to me, that
I would just cite the bill report itself.
Right. And so that's super important. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. Thanks.
Councilman Dorsey.
I'll just say, in general, this seems really simple and straightforward to me. We and the public benefit from having robust reporting of information, as detailed a level as we can get, and we, the representatives of the city, oversee, if that's the way we put it, these city agencies who the tax dollars of citizens of Baltimore City fund to exist. And I think that it'd be silly for us not to ask them to provide us more information to help us to be able to evaluate decisions that come our way. So I want to thank Councilwoman Ramos for having the initiative here to simply ask for a study and report on available information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a very brief comment. This is something that I'm saying to a lot of agencies, and I've been saying for the last several months. Our role here as council members is to decide if it's necessary. This is not a heavy lift. But I think for this particular study and report, Councilwoman Ramos should not even have to put it forward, because I feel that our agencies, whether it's not just the Department of Finance, should be proactive, knowing that we may only have certain information and we need more information or equity measures on TIFs. So what I'm asking for all of our agencies, and the city administrator's office is not represented, however, I do see that there are MOGRs, so you're here. What I want the city administrator's office to do is to be more proactive about the things that we need. If our agencies were proactive, we would not be here putting forth some of these easy answers or just things, and that's it. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, colleagues. Any other questions?
Just a statement, Mr. Chair.
Madam Vice President.
I think something was said about community input, and as a witness with most of these TIFs that are listed, there has been consistent community input before you know, the TIF was even approved. Constant meetings in communities, so on and so forth. Even, you know, there was a process that also we have to go through in our council committees with every single one individually for approval. And community input is welcome there as well. But there were actual visits in the communities and so on. So community input is done with every single one of these within each individual district that we thus far has had a TIF.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Councilman Stokes, then
Just a
Councilwoman
comment.
Ramos.
I think the way the TIF works is already working communities, but there need to be an evaluation, I believe, how it impacts the community. That is not there, and my colleague, Councilman McCray, mentioned that we should not be doing this, but right now, the TIF works. It works in 2 parts of my district, and I'm sure there's other parts in the community, but there's no evaluation how it impact the community, and that's the transparency that we need here on the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to acknowledge that one of the big pieces of this this report is also not just transparency, which is very important, and the analysis that Chair Stokes just talked about in terms of, and Chair McCray just talked about in terms of transparency and impact, but also whether or not a TIF can be used in neighborhoods to address vacant and abandoned properties. That was actually my goal here. To make this work so that if there are changes that need to be made to TIF policy to be able to finance these projects. We need $3 billion, $3 billion with a B dollars to be able to address this issue of vacant and abandoned properties. We need to look at every single tool that may be available. This was the point of having this done. And my colleagues, I appreciate the dialogue, and I think this is great, and I look forward to your support on this bill because I think it's critical to the work that we need to do in our neighborhoods regarding vacant and abandoned properties. That was the whole point. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Any other questions? Councilman Burnett.
Can we just go back through, are there any agencies that are opposed to doing this? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Is anyone in chambers who wishes to testify on this bill? Ms. Betty? Grab the podium and the mic. You can pull the mic down if you want.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Oh, so much better. Thank you, Eric. Good morning again, everyone. I am so glad that I attended today, and I plan to try to attend more often. I had a chance to talk with Ms. Ramos, and I'm pretty much in contact with my councilperson, Eric Costello. One of my major concerns, and I thought you addressed it very eloquently, we do need more transparency. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a developer. I am a homeowner. I am a community advocate. And I'm a person who also still experience inequity, injustice in my community. And as a result of that, as you said, millions of dollars go into the TIF. Do we as a community, and I'll use myself, understand very clearly the impact that this development will occur for our communities, perhaps surrounding development? I have a number of people in my community that are still unemployed. There is a large TIF near my home, but there had not been opportunities that I saw where employment opportunities were made available. It's concerning. I think the study, and as Ms. Ramos said, there is a particular plan for the study to look at vacant and abandoned buildings. But I think the study will also show perhaps we've been a little inequitable. We've not been very fair to our minority communities, our communities that are struggling financially, our communities that are primarily Afro-American and persons of brown color. I think there is a need that we look at our community as a whole to make sure that any expenditures that we're making, how it can also benefit the larger group, as well. So I think the study is needed. I think more transparency is needed. And I know I'm just coming in learning, and I plan to continue to show up and learn more. But what I do want to say, we must remember our poor. We must remember our families. We must remember our college students who are in the minority, the persons who do not have the income to buy luxury units. So I just want us to remember our working class. We're here and we're taxpayers. We want to make sure that our taxes are benefiting us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this one? If there is anyone on the WebEx who wishes to testify, please use the raise hand function. Seeing as there's none, is there a motion to move Amendment 1 from Law Department?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Burnett, second by Dorsey. I'm just going to do voice vote, unless there's any dissension. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The amendment carries 7-0. Next, are there any objections to moving the 3 amendments from Finance Department as a package amongst the committee?
Second.
Hang on. That's not what I asked. I said, is there any opposition to moving all 3 amendments as a package? I want to know if I need to bifurcate the amendments first or not. Is there any opposition to moving them as a package? Seeing as there is none, is there a motion to move all 3 amendments from Finance? Motion by Dorsey. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Burnett. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Okay, is there a motion to move the bill favorably as amended?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Burnett. Is there a second? Second by Dorsey. Costello's a no. Burnett?
Yes.
Dorsey? Yes. McCray?
Yes.
Middleton?
No.
Schleifer? No. Stokes? No. This bill fails with 4 votes in opposition, 3 in support. Stokes was a no. Those were yeses. Okay, next bill, 22-0249, Prevailing Wage, Revisions and Petitions. I will turn it over to Councilman Burnett, chief sponsor of the bill, for brief introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep them brief. The prevailing wage process, which we'll actually learn more about today, is a process in which contractors from across the city and across the state are surveyed to get a better understanding of what the wages are for different types of projects, how much a plumber is making on a steam fitting project. I'm sure I'm butchering all of the types of things that they would be doing, but in short, it's a way to assess what the market is, the pay scale and market for different fields, for different types of projects. This is done at both the city and state level. What this bill would do is consolidate that, so to take some of the load off of our city agencies, to not have to do duplicate work, as well as for contractors to not have to submit 2 surveys to both the local municipality and to the state. What our hope is today is for a presentation on what this process looks like to better educate the council. I'm not looking to move this bill at the time because I think that we do need a little more homework on what the impact will be on a consolidated effort. And so today, just looking for an opportunity to educate the committee on the process as it stands and next steps moving forward, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Jump over to agency reports. And colleagues, as a reminder, we're not going to be moving this bill today per discussions with the sponsor, with the mayor's office and the council president's office, but we will be coming back for this bill at a date in the near future. Law Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Hillary Ruley from the Law Department. Right now, the city's charter gives the Board of Estimates the power to set prevailing wages, and the code sort of says when the BOE's got to look to revise them. State law also provides for prevailing wages, and so if the city wants to adopt the state's prevailing wage, the state requires the city to also adopt a process that goes with it and makes the city potentially liable for failing to follow the process. Adopting that would sort of take away the Board of Estimates' abilities for the wages and rates you're adopting. So I wasn't sure from reading this bill if the intent was to adopt the state process. If so, I've got amendments to make that happen in the bill. If instead the desire is to just sort of use their data and look at their process, the law would already allow the Wage Commission to do that. So I'm not sure exactly what the change would be there. But obviously we'll work with whoever to make sure you're doing whatever you want to do in this bill.
Councilman Schleifer, can you close those doors on your way out in the main area, please? Thank you. Appreciate it. Before we move to the next agency, Mr. Young or Councilman, do you want to respond to that just for clarification?
I'll defer to Mr. Young to explain the process a little better than I can.
Yeah, I'm going to walk through the process in a little bit through my report. Some of the things that the Law Department just mentioned are things that we do want to work through. Specifically, we want to pull the process and use the data. The current bill allows for everything to go through the state. We recognize kind of what their concern is in the bill report. So we're trying to figure out if an alternative solution would suffice or if the state law prevents that. We haven't dug into that just yet. And so we're going to continue that conversation moving forward.
Thank you. Okay, Department of Finance.
Mara James, representing the Department of Finance. We are working with OECR to prepare a report. We haven't finalized that based on needing data from them, but we defer to them on the current meeting right now.
Okay. Office of Comptroller.
Casey Kelleher, Office of the Comptroller. We stand by our bill report and support of this legislation. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm not sure why this was referred to Board of Estimates, but we wouldn't.
It would go to the Board of Estimates, I think, after second reader.
Okay, so that's just, okay, yeah. So we'll skip over that then. And then back to Office of, Office of Labor Commissioner's not here. Does Moger have anything to add on their behalf?
We don't have anything to add. Their report is forthcoming based upon the results of the analysis that OECR is conducting. Thank you.
Got it. And Mr. Young, what's the estimated time frame for that work to be completed?
It depends. Well, I'll tell you like this. The more we get in it, so part of what the delay has been, and first and foremost, want to show appreciation to the President's office and to the Chairman for working with us and giving us the time to continue to do the work and analysis to get you the correct information that you need to make a decision on this bill. We initially thought when the bill was conceived that this would be a very easy switch over. Unfortunately, though, as we've dug into it, we are seeing some things and nuances that need a little bit more digging into and evaluating. So we're constantly working on fulfilling, getting the information to you all. The timeline, I don't want to commit to a specific timeline just yet, merely because as we get into the timeline, there's nuances that begat new nuances. And as we've begot those new nuances, then that has caused for additional conversation, particularly with the state folks, to figure out the specifics of their process, how they've come up with the data that they have. There's questions in the data that we've seen already that we want to make sure we have clarity on, and we didn't have that information until just this last week. And so I don't want to commit to a specific timeline, but I just would like the council to know that we're working very diligently to get that information.
Got it. Thank you. Do we have anyone, actually any questions for agencies, colleagues? Council Vice President Middleton, Councilwoman McCray. Actually, hang on one second. What's that, sir?
Would you like me to present first?
You're not listed on the sheet.
I'm not an agency for referral?
I mean, yeah, you're more than welcome to. I get a sheet from Council Services with the list of agencies the bill's been, I'm assuming that's a glitch, right? This was referred to you?
I would.
You are the, can we let Mr. Young testify first? Because I think there was a glitch in the sheet, so I passed over him inadvertently. So,
And
Mr. Young, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if we could allow me to share screen.
I'm going to wait for Marguerite to come back. She's the brains of this operation. Mr. Young would like to share his screen.
Oh, okay.
Do you all see it? It's sharing. I can see it on the small side, but I don't know if you want it to be the larger one. Well, thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. My name is Kalen Young, the Deputy Director of the Baltimore City Office of Equity and Civil Rights. In our office, we have 5 divisions: the CRC, Community Relations Commission, the Wage Commission, which we'll be talking about today, the Mayor's Commission on Disabilities, the Equity Office, and also the Civilian Review Board, which, as you know, will be transforming into the Police Accountability Board shortly. Again, today we're here with our Wage Commission to talk about prevailing wage and adjusting the process by which we set our prevailing wage here in Baltimore. To start, we want to give you just kind of a background on what the prevailing wage is. It's defined as essentially the basic hourly rate for individuals who are similarly situated and doing work on city-funded projects. And city-funded projects I specifically talk about because we're in Baltimore City, but generally it's based on the jurisdiction of record. It's found in Article 5 of our city code, subsection 25. The main thing that we're hoping to do, again, is to streamline our processes to be more in alignment with the state. The purpose of that is because our office, first and foremost, is strained with regard to capacity. We have 3 members of the Wage Commission staff that handles this work on top of their normal work, which includes investigations for living wage, for minimum wage, for prevailing wage. Their human trafficking work that we do runs out of our wage staff, and some other things as well. So hopefully what we would do is move towards working with the state so that way contractors and unions and non-union associations could all work through a process that they're familiar with. It would reduce redundancies as well. But also, more importantly, we would be able to secure better data and better information with regard to how to setting the prevailing wage throughout the city. And then additionally, it'll, again, free up our bandwidth so that way we can focus on enforcing these very same wages that we are expected to help set. The process, quite simply, is that we send out surveys to those individuals who are doing work on city-funded projects, and those surveys come back telling us what individuals are paid on those projects based on their classification and based on their trade. The surveys go out at the beginning of September, so they just went out 3 weeks ago, and we expect them back on October the 31st. The survey data is analyzed. We put that information into a chart, and then we present it to the unions, and then we present it to the Board of Estimates. I'm going to get into that in a second. But ultimately, the Board of Estimates will set the prevailing wage. So here's a basic timeline for your review. Again, it starts in September. After October and going into November, we then have conversations with all of the interested parties to make sure that we are securing their feedback based on the data. And then at the end, shortly after Thanksgiving, we're presenting that data to the Board of Estimates, and it's for the Board of Estimates to finalize that in the month of December. Of note, of the last 2 fiscal years, we were not able to meet this deadline. Some of the rationale for that is simply turnover in our office and turnover in mayoral administrations. Hopefully, moving forward with this bill, we would be able to alleviate having those concerns, and that has a negative impact on people getting paid their wages, and also clarity for unions, non-union associations, and contractors as well. On the right side, you'll see what the state's process is. You'll see, in general, that it mirrors our process from a timing standpoint. And again, part of the benefit is that folks who are submitting these surveys won't have to submit it to us and them. Indeed, when we're looking at the data that we've started to look at already, we see that the state has a higher participation rate as opposed to what we have. Our participation rate varies by the year, depending on who the staff is, depending on what's going on in the world, so to speak. Whereas if we were able to move forward with this bill, then we would be able to funnel all the information for both city and state funded projects through the state's process. So again, some of the goals of the bill, again, streamlining the process. These are things I've already said a few times. Making sure that workers are paid better, making sure that we can have better bandwidth. But I want to jump to this last slide here, which really talks about the key points for your consideration. One of the things and why we're continuing to do the data and why we wanted to have this initial conversation with you all at this ripe time is, again, things are starting right now. We want to make sure that you all will be able to walk through the process with us as we're setting the rates for this year. The city will set its own rates this year. Hopefully by next year we will be able to work through a different process. Second, one of the things you want to know is that the state does, when it sets its rates, it sets it on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. Each county gets its own set of rates. Baltimore City and Prince George's County are the only 2 jurisdictions in the state which sets its own rates. For the last 12 years, the state of Maryland has been doing this process, but prior to, it did not do this process. But folks think that their process is a little bit better. And we continue. One of the reasons we started to do our own process is because we were doing prevailing wage before the state started doing prevailing wage. And then one more nuance that I think folks need to be mindful of is with regard to classifications. The city uses 5 classifications. The state uses 2. And so this is one of the things that we looked at when we, again, first started to prepare for the hearing. We thought it would be easy, but as we dug in doing our due diligence, we started to notice these differences. One of the differences is the difference with regard to the classifications. Now, of note, while we do have 5 classifications, the primary classifications that we use are the same 2 primary classifications that the state uses. So there is a significant overlap, but there are some things that we might want to be mindful of, particularly as we're considering if we're going to allow for the state to do the setting, or if we're going to find some sort of a middle ground where the city would continue to have the power to set its own rates. I'm going to show you one more thing really quickly, and that is the chart which compares the 2 rates, sets of rates. So one of the things, as we're, again, looking at the data, trying to compile the data from the state, and comparing it to the work that we do, of course, it's important that we pay attention to what the last few fiscal years would have looked like. If we were doing this process with the state, what would our rates look like what would our rates look like as compared with what their rates are? And so we have this chart which we will provide to the council. of the last 3 fiscal years. And when you go through, let me tell you a few things that we already have seen. First is that many rates are barely changed. I mean, within $1 difference of what the city sets versus what the state sets. So in those situations, it's going to be a wash. However, we also found significant increases in certain rates, and by significant, I'm talking about 10, 15, 20% change, and that's up and down. That means that in some instances, the state has a higher rate, in some instances, the city has a higher rate. And so that's, again, one of the things that we did not anticipate, but that we wanted to make sure that we presented to you all as you consider either moving us to the to the state process or finding some sort of a middle ground where we continue to have our ability to perhaps use their process, but set our own rates. And then lastly, there's some places where you'll find that we set a rate, but that the state does not set a rate. So of course, in those situations, we would want to and have to make sure that we're able to set those rates. Lastly, as it pertains to the surveys, again, the state and us do our own surveys. There is a concern at times, again, as it pertains to participation rate. What happens when we don't have enough surveys, and what defines enough are 2 questions that are outstanding. What I found in the time working in this office is that depending on who the staffer is who was doing the work, that is who determined what enough was. So prior to Araceli Stafford, who's here with us today, who is our supervisor for Wage Commission, she was recently promoted to that role from an investigator role this calendar year. But prior to her, when we did the last prevailing wage rates, the staff supervisor selected that 5 surveys was enough. I understand that prior to that, I think the number was 3 with the previous person. And so again, there's really no clarity there, and so this would be another point where we would want to raise to the council for consideration on how to figure out what the appropriate prevailing wage is. And then lastly, again, as it pertains to those surveys, the state statute has a very set structure on, based on how many surveys we get, if it's 50% of the people that's getting paid this rate, that's the rate. If it's not 50% and it's 40% of the people that's getting that rate, that's the rate. And then they have a very, very clear delineation on how you set the rate. We do not have that clear delineation. It's for the council's wisdom to determine if we need it, but it's something else that we want to make sure that we want to point out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think we had Council Vice President Middleton and then Councilwoman McCray.
Thank you for that presentation, and within that presentation, you basically answered my questions. I, as a past director of the state apprenticeship system, and knowing that they also have a prevailing wage board and so on, and worked with those offices for at least 7 years, I think you're definitely on the right track. And again, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Councilwoman McCray.
Thank you. The introduction of the previous bill, the concerns were stated that they spurred from complaints that the Wage Commission did not have enough resources available for enforcement of the prevailing wage laws to make certain companies that are doing city contracts were actually paying their workers the wages that they were supposed to. Since 2020, has the agency received any increase in staffing or resources to be able to properly enforce prevailing wage laws?
So there are a few things as it pertains to enforcement, a few concerns that we're working through. To directly answer your question, my understanding is that we have we have been continuing our level of service since 2020. We had that supervisor who resigned. We have elevated Araceli, and we've hired an additional person since then. So we remain at 3 employees in our wage enforcement division. We would argue that we could use additional staff. We're working towards hiring additional staff currently. But additionally, there's other concerns as it pertains to updating our processes and technology that have also been a negative impact on our ability to do wage enforcement. Specifically, prior to my coming in, within the last 5 years, we were receiving all payrolls via paper. and fax. So you would have reams of paper on desks that our investigators had to go through. We've since done away with that, and since I've been in the office, myself and Araceli have been able to transition that over into emails, and so now we're getting 1,000 emails to do that. But the more important piece is what we're going to do next. We're working with Imbu and Chris Lundy to implement a database called B2G Now, and a portion of that called LCP Tracker, which would allow for contractors to be able to put those payrolls directly into the database, and then therefore improve our processes with regard to being able to do that enforcement. That work is currently ongoing, and we hope to have it up and running by the end of the calendar year. That, as a consequence, will improve our ability to enforce wage laws, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Okay, so thanks for providing the information. Going back to the original question, since 2020, you received any additional staffing or resources since that original bill was introduced?
No, I think that's what our first thing I said is we remain at our current status of service from what we had before. We had some workforce changes, but we remain at 3 individuals on that force.
Okay, is there any data or anything that you guys can point to that would show that simplifying this process would allow the agency to properly enforce the prevailing wage laws, and will additional measures need to be implemented in addition to the ones that you stated in order to fulfill the needs?
I don't have data to point to it right now. I mean, it's merely a matter of having something less to do allows for us to have more bandwidth to do something else. I also would defer to some of the unions who are in the building, who I think may be testifying, who could probably talk to how the state process is better, and we've been relying on some of them with regard to their experience on that side. Also, our supervisor, Ms. Stafford, also used to work there, so she has an understanding of kind of how those processes are better and why they would be valuable to our office. But again, I would not say that we have data to show that, but indeed understanding that one less thing, it allows us to focus on the other things. And the things that I just pointed to in the last answer are really the high level stuff that we're focused on that we think will have a significant impact. I'm talking about a 40 to 50% reduction in our workload if we're able to get that database up and running.
Okay, thank you, and I look forward to the testimony.
Thank you, colleagues. Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Stokes.
Mr. Young, I want to understand, you asking the city to use the state prevailing wage system. I understand it. You're saying the city used 5 and the state used 2. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
The second, if that happens, how did that impact business here in the city when the city said 1 prevailing wage and the state might be higher?
Yeah, well, that's part of the concerns that we're looking at and why we want to focus on the data. It's also why I asked the chair to, give finance in particular a pass on their bill report right now, because we want to make sure that we have a full understanding of where those changes are. We've already seen what looks like going to be a significant increase for laborers. We already gave them one last year. We're going to probably have to give them another one. And that may have a fiscal impact on business. That will certainly, therefore, have a fiscal impact on what the city has to pay, or what the city, what the bids that would come in on contracts. It'll have an impact on what those bids would look like, and therefore the city's bottom line.
And my first question: so you're asking the council to use what the state used in terms of prevailing wage, and not the state have a prevailing wage system and the city? Is that what we're talking about also?
Yeah, again, the first piece is a matter of process. Our process has been outdated, and our staff has been strained in doing the work. And so it's an effort to reduce the bandwidth load on our staff, but then also to transition to a process that everybody that's in the industry is already familiar with, that they actually prefer. I think they'll testify to that fact. And we have a great relationship with the state, and they're willing to work with us to get it done. And we've had those conversations. We're continuing to have those conversations. And indeed, in a future hearing, we expect to bring the state along to answer questions directly from the council as well.
So my other statement is, so that means the city actually had their own system before the state actually created their own?
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Okay. Public testimony, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair, members of the council. Thanks for the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. My name is Jermaine Jones. I'm the Baltimore Area Director for the Baltimore DC Building Trades. The Baltimore DC Building Trades Council represents 24 local union affiliates with over 25,000 skilled craft professionals in the building and construction industry in the greater Baltimore, Washington, DC, Northern Virginia region. We advocate for advancements in the construction industry in addition to ensuring every worker receives an honest day's pay for a hard day's work, return home safely to their family, and receives health care and retirement that they one day they can rely on. I'm here today just to testify in support of this legislation for three main reasons. One, in collaboration with our contractors, every year we fill out, prevailing wage surveys for the state. And also for the state, we do it specifically for Baltimore, just to turn around and fill out hundreds of surveys all over again. In addition, this is, a heavy lift on a lot of our contractors, especially our smaller ones, our WBE and women-owned businesses, where often they spend their time out in the field working, but during this time of year to fill out these surveys, they actually have to be in the office filling out these hundreds of surveys. Secondly, in the past, there's also been delays with getting Baltimore City's prevailing wage surveys out, which makes it tough for contractors to get their estimates in and, impact wages. I think if we streamline things and these, delays may not happen, which then contractors have an easier job bidding on projects and knowing what the wages are going to be. And the third major reason is it impacts how much money workers make. As testified earlier, in some instances, there's maybe up to 20% difference in wages, but and that's not it's not convenient for workers. I'll say to know that 1 month you're working on one job and you're receiving a certain wage, but because now you're working on this Baltimore City prevailing wage job, or you go from working on a state prevailing wage job where you're receiving one wage, and then you're working on another one where you're receiving a Baltimore City prevailing wage, and you might receive a 20% pay cut for the next year if you're working on a job. That's not good for families. That's not good for stability. I think if there's any way that we can streamline things and make those wages, better for Baltimore City residents, where you don't receive maybe a 10 or 20% decrease, I think that's more than that would be helpful for the citizens in Baltimore. I know one of the reasons why that has happened in the past is because of the way we've done things in Baltimore City when it comes to establishing what our prevailing wage was going to be. In the past, when they've gotten surveys back and the jump was too high, they didn't make the jump increase. They said, well, we're only going to go 70% there or 40% there, when the state actually just put in what the data gotten. So that's one of the reasons why that disparity exists, and it just continued to replicate itself. But thank you for an opportunity to testify, and I appreciate you taking this bill in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here from the public who wishes to testify? Anyone online who wishes to testify, please use the raise hand function within WebEx. Okay. With that being said, we're going to go into recess. We're not going to call a follow-up hearing for this bill until all of the agency reports have been submitted and all of the amendments have been drafted by DLR. As soon as all that stuff is taken care of, please email it to me and I will schedule a hearing for the next available hearing date within committee. Thank you. We're now in recess.